What would you do if your own family uninvited you from the biggest night of your brother's life because you might ruin the brand? Well, I found out they'd been forging my signature on million-dollar loans for years. And that's when things got really interesting. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I was knee-deep in what might have been the most important legal merger of my career. You know those nights when you're so focused that the outside world just disappears. That was me. Coffee gone cold, papers scattered across my dining table, highlighter marks bleeding through contract pages like battle scars. I'm Emily, by the way. 32, corporate attorney, the kind of person who reads the fine print on everything, including family relationships, apparently. My phone buzzed against the mahogany table. I almost ignored it. Almost. But something about the timing felt different. Important people don't text at midnight unless something's wrong. Alex, my brother. The message loaded slowly, like my phone was giving me one last chance to stay in my peaceful little bubble of legal clauses and merger terms. Hey Em, we've been talking as a family and we're asking you not to attend the gala this Saturday. It's about optics and the board members who'll be there. You understand how these things work. Please don't make this harder than it has to be. I read it once, twice, 3 times. The words didn't change. My family was uninviting me from my brother's biggest night, the annual Silicon Valley Entrepreneurs Gala, the night Alex would receive the Entrepreneur of the Year award, the night our parents had been planning for months, calling it their proudest moment. And I was being asked to stay home because I might hurt the brand. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could feel that familiar tightness in my chest, the one that had followed me since childhood, whenever I realized I was the variable they needed to control. But here's the thing about being a lawyer. You learn to keep your composure when the ground shifts beneath your feet. You learn to respond, not react. So I typed back exactly 2 words. Got it. And I hit send. But as I set the phone down and stared at those merger documents, something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger exactly. It wasn't even surprise. It was something quieter and infinitely more dangerous. Clarity. Because for the first time in 32 years, I finally understood exactly where I stood in my family's hierarchy. And that understanding was about to change everything. To understand why that text hit me like a freight train, you need to know something about growing up in Silicon Valley in the 90s and 2000s. Success here isn't just about what you accomplish. It's about how visible that accomplishment is. How many people see it, talk about it, share it on social media. My parents, David and Linda Chen Morrison, were the kind of couple that networked at their own anniversary parties. Dad built 3 successful startups before I turned 10. Mom ran the most exclusive PR firm south of San Francisco. Their dinner conversations weren't about homework or weekend plans. They were strategy sessions for empire building. And Alex was born for this world. Even as a kid, he had this magnetic quality that made adults lean in when he talked. By high school, he was already pitching business ideas to Dad's venture capitalist friends at barbecues. He looked the part, sounded the part, lived the part. Me, I was the one taking notes in the corner. Don't get me wrong, I was ambitious. Valedictorian at Palo Alto High, full ride to Stanford, then Harvard Law, but my victories were quiet ones. Dean's List, not homecoming queen. Law review editor, not student body president. Alex launched his first company, a social media analytics platform, right out of college. I was in my 2nd year at Harvard when he called, practically vibrating with excitement through the phone. This is it? This is the big one, but we need capital for the expansion. Real capital. He'd gotten interest from 3 major clients, but they wanted guarantees of scale, the kind of scale that required a $1 million line of credit to execute. Here's the thing, he said, and I remember his voice dropping to that careful tone he used when he was about to ask for something big. The bank wants a co-signer, someone with a clean credit history and stable income. Dad's assets are all tied up in his latest venture, and Mom's firm is leveraged to the hilt. I was 24, fresh out of law school with a job offer from a top-tier firm. Clean credit, stable future income, everything the bank wanted to see. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't family, Alex continued. And when this takes off, and it will take off, you'll be credited as a founding investor. Your name on everything. I signed those papers on a Tuesday afternoon in downtown Boston, pen scratching across guarantee forms, while Alex flew back to California to close the deals that would change his life. Within 6 months, his company landed contracts worth $8 million. Within a year, he was featured on the cover of Forbes' 30 Under 30 issue. Within 2 years, he sold the company for $43 million. And my name, well, let's just say it never made it onto anything public-facing. When reporters asked about his early investors, Alex talked about family support in the vaguest possible terms. When he gave interviews about his success, I became part of the incredible team behind the scenes. But here's what really stung. At his company's exit celebration, the big party where everyone who mattered was supposed to be there, Alex gave a speech thanking everyone who made it possible. He mentioned his college roommate who designed the first logo. He mentioned his high school girlfriend who helped with initial market research. He mentioned our parents, obviously. He never mentioned the person whose signature made the whole thing legally possible. I stood in the back of that crowded Palo Alto restaurant, champagne glass in hand, watching my little brother accept congratulations from some of the most powerful people in tech. And I realized something that would take me years to fully process. In my family's version of success, I wasn't a player. I was infrastructure. The worst part, I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself that family comes first, that his success was my success, that there would be other opportunities for recognition. I had no idea how wrong I was about that last part. After law school, I did something my family didn't expect. Instead of taking the obvious path to a Silicon Valley law firm where I could be useful to their network, I moved to San Francisco and joined Morrison & Associates, a mid-sized firm specializing in corporate restructuring and mergers. It wasn't the flashiest choice. Nobody was going to write Forbes articles about my work helping companies navigate Chapter 11 proceedings. But for the first time in my adult life, I was building something that belonged entirely to me. My apartment in the Mission District became my sanctuary. Exposed brick walls, built-in bookshelves filled with legal texts and mystery novels, a kitchen window that caught the afternoon light just right. I could walk to work, grab coffee from the same corner cafe every morning, have conversations with people who didn't know anything about my family's business empire. It was liberating in a way I hadn't expected. My colleagues at Morrison became the closest thing I'd ever had to chosen family. There was David Kim, a bankruptcy attorney who made origami cranes during depositions to stay calm. Maria Santos, who specialized in employment law and kept a collection of succulents on her windowsill that she talked to like pets. And James Fisher, our senior partner, who had this philosophy that the best lawyers weren't the ones who won every case, but the ones who helped people rebuild their lives when everything fell apart. For 3 years, I threw myself into that work. I became the attorney companies called when they needed someone who could see solutions, where others saw only problems. I helped a family bakery restructure their debt and stay open. I guided a tech startup through a partnership dissolution that could have destroyed both founders' careers. I was good at it. Really good. But it was a Thursday evening book club meeting that changed everything. I joined this little group that met monthly at a bookstore in the Castro. 8 people, mostly women, mostly in their 30s, reading everything from memoir to literary fiction. We were discussing Educated by Tara Westover when this woman across from me made a comment that stopped me cold. "It's fascinating how families can love you and erase you at the same time," she said, her voice thoughtful. "Like they need you to stay small so their version of the story makes sense." Her name was Sophie Nguyen, licensed family therapist, first-generation Vietnamese American, with this way of cutting straight to the heart of things that was both gentle and absolutely devastating. After the meeting, we ended up at a wine bar talking until closing time. She told me about growing up with parents who'd sacrificed everything to come to America, how their love came wrapped in expectations so tight they sometimes felt like constraints. I found myself telling her about Alex, about the co-signing, about feeling invisible at my own family gatherings. You know what's interesting? Sophie said, swirling her wine glass. You're describing a family that treats love like a brand, like it has to be managed and controlled and presented to the world in a specific way. That hit me like a physical blow. Because it was exactly right. Sophie became my person, not in a romantic way, though people sometimes assumed that. She was my emotional rock, the friend who could decode the family dynamics I'd been swimming in my whole life, without realizing how toxic the water had become. We met for lunch every Friday, rain or shine. She'd listen to my stories about family dinners, where Alex dominated the conversation while I served the wine and cleared the plates. She'd ask questions that forced me to examine patterns I'd never noticed. "When was the last time your parents asked about your work?" she asked one afternoon. I thought about it for way too long. I think maybe when I first got the job at Morrison, 3 years ago. And when was the last time they talked about Alex's work? Last Tuesday, for about 45 minutes. Sophie had this expression she'd get when she was about to say something important. Her voice would get quieter, more careful. Emily, love doesn't require branding approval. She said it so simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. But I felt something crack open inside my chest when I heard it. Love doesn't require branding approval. I started writing that phrase on sticky notes, putting them on my bathroom mirror, my laptop, my car dashboard, because I was beginning to realize that I'd spent 32 years of my life trying to earn something that should have been freely given. And maybe it was time to stop trying. But I had no idea that the universe was about to test exactly how serious I was about that realization. Because sitting in my email inbox 3 months after that conversation with Sophie was an invitation that would force me to choose between the family I was born into and the person I was becoming. An invitation to Alex's biggest night yet. The night that would prove once and for all where I actually stood in the hierarchy of people who mattered. I found out about the biggest night of my brother's life the way most people find out about their high school classmates' promotions. Through LinkedIn. It was a Wednesday morning in October. I was scrolling through my feed with my coffee, half listening to the morning news when I saw the post that made my hand freeze halfway to my mouth. Thrilled to announce that Alexander Chen Morrison has been selected as this year's recipient of the Silicon Valley Entrepreneurs Association's Entrepreneur of the Year Award. The gala celebrating Alex and other industry leaders will be held November 18th at the Fairmont, San Francisco. Proud of our son, posted by Linda Chen Morrison, my mother. I read it 3 times before the words fully registered. Alex was getting the most prestigious award in Silicon Valley tech. There was going to be a gala. My parents were planning it, posting about it, celebrating it. And I was finding out about it through social media. I clicked through to the official announcement. There was Alex's headshot professional and polished next to a bio that made him sound like the second coming of Steve Jobs. The ceremony would honor visionary leaders who have shaped the future of technology and entrepreneurship. The guest list would include CEOs from Fortune 500 companies, venture capitalists, politicians, media, personalities. This wasn't just an award ceremony. This was the kind of event that launched people into an entirely different stratosphere of influence and wealth. I scrolled through the comments. Congratulations poured in from family, friends, business associates, even some of my parents' neighbors. People I'd known since childhood, people who'd watched me grow up, people who presumably knew I existed. Not one of them mentioned me. I spent the rest of that Wednesday in a strange fog. I kept checking my phone, waiting for the call or text that would fill in the obvious gap. Surely my parents had just forgotten to mention it to me directly. Surely there was an invitation coming. Surely they wouldn't plan the most important event in our family's recent history without including their own daughter. Thursday passed. Nothing. Friday I broke down and called my mom. "Oh, honey, isn't it exciting?" she gushed before I could even bring up the gala. "Alex is just over the moon. The planning committee wants him to give a keynote address, and we're trying to decide if he should hire a speech coach or just go with his natural charisma. It sounds incredible, I said carefully. When is it again? November 18th. A Saturday evening, black tie, very elegant. The Fairmont Ballroom. Can you imagine Alex will look so handsome in his tuxedo? I waited for her to say more, to mention my attendance, to ask about my schedule, to include me in any way whatsoever. Instead, she launched into a detailed description of the menu selection process. Mom, I finally interrupted. Should I block out November 18th on my calendar? The pause was so long, I thought the call had dropped. Oh, sweetie, she said, and her voice shifted to that careful tone people use when they're about to deliver bad news gently. We should probably talk about that. But we didn't talk about it. Not then. She said Alex wanted to handle the conversation himself, that it was complicated, that they'd call me back soon to explain. 2 weeks passed before that midnight text arrived. 2 weeks of watching my family plan the event of a lifetime while I waited to find out if I was invited to my own brother's celebration. And when Alex's message finally came with its careful language about optics and board members and making things easier, I understood something that maybe I should have seen coming all along. I wasn't being excluded from the gala. I was being excluded from the family narrative. The official story of Alex's success couldn't include a sister who didn't fit the image they wanted to project. Maybe I wasn't photogenic enough for the media coverage. Maybe my career wasn't impressive enough to mention alongside his achievements. Maybe I was just too complicated to explain. Or maybe they'd finally decided that after 32 years of being their silent supporter, their behind-the-scenes helper, their reliable backup plan, I no longer served a purpose in the version of themselves they wanted to show the world. But here's what they didn't know. What none of them knew. In all those years of being the quiet one, the responsible one, the one who signed the papers and stayed in the background, I'd learned things. I'd kept records. I'd paid attention to details that everyone else was too focused on their public image to notice. And some of those details were about to become very, very important. Because the same signature that had guaranteed Alex's first big break was tied to a lot more than any of us had discussed. And if my family wanted to erase me from their story, they were about to discover that some erasures come with consequences they never saw coming. After that midnight text, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Alex's message, about the careful way he'd phrased it. We're asking you not to attend. Like it was a reasonable request from reasonable people. But reasonable people don't uninvite family members from milestone celebrations. Reasonable people don't treat their sister like a PR liability. So, at 3 a.m, wide awake and angry in a way I hadn't been since childhood, I did what any good lawyer does when something doesn't add up. I started digging through documents. I pulled out my old filing cabinet, the one filled with years of family financial entanglements that I'd signed without thinking too hard about the implications. Because that's what you do for family, right? You trust them. You sign where they tell you to sign. The first document I found was exactly what I expected. The personal guarantee I'd signed for Alex's initial expansion. Back when he was 22, and I was fresh out of law school. $1 million in credit with my signature as the backup if things went wrong. I remembered that day clearly. Alex had flown to Boston, taken me to dinner at this expensive restaurant in Back Bay, talked about his vision for changing the world through technology. I'd felt so proud to be trusted with something so important, so grateful to be included in his success story. But as I kept reading through the terms, something felt off. The liability structure was more comprehensive than I remembered. If Alex's company defaulted, I wouldn't just be responsible for the original loan amount. I'd be liable for accumulated interest penalties and any additional costs associated with collection. I grabbed my laptop and started researching Alex's current company status. What I found made my coffee go cold. Alex had leveraged his original success into a much bigger venture. A blockchain-based supply chain platform that had raised significant venture capital, but hadn't turned a profit yet. And according to the quarterly reports I could access, the The company was burning through cash faster than it was generating revenue, which meant that $1 million guarantee I'd signed 8 years ago, it was still very much in play. But that wasn't the part that made my hands start shaking. I kept digging through my files and found two more documents that I absolutely did not remember signing. The first was another personal guarantee, this one for $2 million, dated just 6 months ago. The signature looked like mine. The handwriting analysis might even confirm it was mine, but I had zero memory of signing anything related to a $2 million loan. The second document was even more disturbing. A limited liability company agreement for something called Chen Morrison Ventures, with my name listed as a founding member and my signature authorizing the company to take on debt in my name. I'd never heard of Chen Morrison Ventures. I'd never agreed to found any company with Alex, but there was my signature clear as day. By 6 a.m., I was on the phone with Marcus Webb, a colleague from law school who specialized in financial fraud. Marcus was the kind of lawyer you called when you needed someone who could see through corporate shell games and follow money trails that others missed. "Emily, slow down," he said after I'd rapid-fired through my discovery. "You're telling me you found loan documents with your signature that you don't remember signing on—" "Marcus, I'm a lawyer. I don't sign $2 million guarantees and forget about it. Someone forged these documents?" "Okay, let's think about this systematically. Who had access to samples of your signature? Who knew enough about your financial situation to make the forgeries credible?" The answer hit me like a physical blow. My family had samples of my signature on dozens of documents going back years. Birthday cards, family contracts, property agreements, and they knew my social security number, my banking information, my employment history. They knew everything a forger would need to make fake documents look authentic. "Emily," Marcus said, and his voice had shifted into the careful professional tone he used when delivering very bad news. "If these signatures are forged, this isn't just fraud. This is identity theft on a massive scale. And if the companies attached to these guarantees default, you could be liable for millions of dollars in debt that you never agreed to take on." I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen as the morning light streamed through the windows, trying to process what I'd just discovered. My family hadn't just excluded me from Alex's celebration. They'd been systematically using my identity to secure their business ventures without my knowledge or consent. They'd turned me into their secret financial backup plan, and I'd been too trusting, too family-focused, too eager to support Alex's dreams to notice what was happening. But the most devastating part wasn't the money. It wasn't even the fraud. It was the realization that the people who were supposed to love me most in the world had been treating me like a financial instrument for years. Like my signature was just another asset they could deploy when they needed to secure better loan terms. And now, they wanted me to stay away from the gala because I might hurt their optics. I thought about Sophie's words. Love doesn't require branding approval. But apparently in my family, love did require staying silent about forgery. Well, I'd been silent long enough, and Alex's big night was about to become very, very complicated. I chose my outfit carefully. Black silk dress, simple, but elegant. Pearl earrings that had belonged to my grandmother. Hair pulled back in a low chignon. I wanted to look like someone who belonged at a Silicon Valley gala because for the first time in my life, I knew that I did belong. Just not in the way my family had planned. I arrived at the Fairmont San Francisco at 7:30, half an hour after the cocktail reception had started. I could hear the sounds of the party drifting from the ballroom, the clink of champagne glasses, and the murmur of conversations that would reshape tech industry partnerships and venture capital deals. But I wasn't there to crash the party. I was there to meet Thomas Chen, Alex's assistant, and our second cousin, who had sent me a very interesting email 3 days earlier. "Emily, we need to talk. I have documents you should see. Saturday night, parking garage level B2. Thomas was waiting by his car when I found him holding a manila envelope and looking like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. "I wasn't sure you'd actually come," he said. "You said you had proof about the forged signatures." "I'm here." He handed me the envelope. "I've been Alex's assistant for 3 years. I process all his paperwork, coordinate with lawyers, handle document execution. Emily, I watched him practice copying your signature. My hands went numb as I opened the envelope. Inside were photocopies of handwritten notes in Alex's writing, practicing different versions of my name. Dozens of attempts getting progressively closer to my actual signature style. There's more, Thomas said. I have emails between Alex and your parents discussing how to handle your involvement in the company financing. They knew you hadn't actually signed those later documents. I flipped through the pages, email chains dating back months with subject lines like Emily situation and guaranteed documentation. My parents weren't just aware of the forgery, they had helped plan it. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Because someone in this family should actually care about what's legal, and because watching them plan to exclude you from tonight while they're using your credit to keep the company afloat, that's not family, that's exploitation. Before I could respond, I heard footsteps echoing through the parking garage. Alex appeared around the corner still in his tuxedo from the cocktail reception, followed by both of my parents. Thomas, what the hell are you doing? Alex's voice bounced off the concrete walls. I'm giving Emily information she has a right to have. My father stepped forward, his face flushed with anger or embarrassment or both. Emily, this is ridiculous. Tonight is supposed to be a celebration, and you're down here in a parking garage causing drama. I'm causing drama. I held up the envelope. I'm not the one who's been forging signatures for months. My mother made a sound like a wounded animal. Emily, honey, you're taking this completely out of context. We were protecting you. You didn't want to be involved in the business decisions, so we handled the paperwork ourselves. You handled it by committing identity theft. Alex stepped closer, and for the first time in our entire relationship, I saw him clearly. Not as my successful little brother, not as the family golden child, but as a man who had built his empire on the foundation of other people's trust and financial security. You're blowing this way out of proportion. So what if I signed your name a few times? You would have said yes anyway. You always say yes. You didn't just erase me from your success story, Alex. You used me. You've been using me for years. Of course I used you, the words exploded out of him. You were the safety net. You had good credit, stable income, no complicated business relationships. You were perfect for what we needed. The parking garage went completely silent. And you always said yes, he continued, his voice dropping. Every single time we asked for something, you said yes. Why would we think this time was different? I looked at my parents standing there in their formal wear, their faces carefully blank. I looked at Thomas, who was staring at the ground like he wanted to disappear. I looked at Alex, my little brother, who had just admitted that he'd never seen me as anything more than a convenient financial resource. You're right, I said. I always said yes. I said yes when you needed a cosigner. I said yes when you needed someone to handle the boring legal details. I said yes when you needed me to stay quiet about my contributions to your success. Alex's shoulders relaxed slightly, like he thought I was conceding. But Alex, I continued, I'm not your silent partner anymore. What does that mean? It means the banks received my formal withdrawal from all guarantees yesterday. It means your company has 30 days to provide alternative collateral or face immediate loan acceleration. And it means that if you ever use my name on any document without my explicit written consent, again, I will file criminal charges for identity theft. My father started to say something, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. It also means that tonight, while you're upstairs accepting an award for entrepreneurial success, I'm going home to draft a formal complaint to the district attorney's office detailing 8 years of systematic financial fraud. Emily, you can't be serious, my mother whispered. I'm dead serious. The only question is whether I file it tomorrow or Monday. Alex's face went completely white. What do you want? And that was the moment I realized I'd won. Not because I'd gotten revenge, not because I'd destroyed his big night, but because for the first time in my adult life, my family was asking what I wanted, instead of telling me what they needed. I want you to learn the difference between love and exploitation, I said. I want you to understand that family isn't a business strategy, and I want you to figure out how to be successful without using people who trust you. I turned to walk toward the elevator, then paused. Oh, and Alex, congratulations on your award. I hope it was worth it. The elevator doors closed on 4 people who finally understood that their silent partner had found her voice, and she wasn't planning to be quiet anymore. I drove home that night through the quiet streets of San Francisco, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt completely at peace. Not because I'd gotten revenge, not because I'd ruined Alex's big night, but because I'd finally said everything I needed to say to the people who were supposed to love me most in the world. When I got to my apartment, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on my couch, and looked out at the city lights sparkling below. My phone had 17 missed calls and 43 unread text messages. I turned it off without reading a single one. That night, I slept better than I had in years. The legal aftermath took months to resolve. Alex's company managed to secure alternative financing, barely avoiding bankruptcy. Thomas quit and started his own consulting firm. My parents hired a family therapist, though they never invited me to any of the sessions. And me, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I left Morrison & Associates and started my own firm, Chen Advisory Services, specializing in helping entrepreneurs navigate complex family business relationships and financial structures. Turns out, there are a lot of people out there who've been used as silent partners in their own family's success stories. My first client was a woman named Jessica Martinez, whose brother had been using her credit to fund his restaurant expansion for 3 years, without telling her. My second was David Kim, whose parents had been forging his signature on property deals since he graduated from college. The work was satisfying in a way I'd never experienced before. I wasn't just practicing law. I was helping people reclaim their financial autonomy from families who confused love with exploitation. 6 months after the gala, Sophie and I were having our usual Friday lunch when she made a suggestion that changed everything. "You know what this city needs," she said, picking at her salad. "An event that celebrates all the people who make success possible, but never get credit for it. The silent partners, the financial guarantors, the behind-the-scenes supporters who get erased from the official success stories." That conversation became the foundation for what we now call the Unsung Founders Summit, an annual event honoring female entrepreneurs, family business supporters, and financial contributors who've been overlooked by traditional industry recognition. This year's summit was held last month at the same Fairmont Ballroom where Alex received his Entrepreneur of the Year award. But instead of honoring one person's individual success, we celebrated 50 women whose contributions had been systematically undervalued or ignored. Sophie gave the opening remarks. I closed the evening with a speech about the difference between being useful to someone's success and being truly valued as a partner in that success. "Love doesn't require you to stay small," I told the audience. "Love doesn't require you to stay silent. And love definitely doesn't require you to let other people take credit for your contributions to their dreams." After the event, as Sophie and I were cleaning up, she asked me if I regretted anything about how things had unfolded with my family. I thought about it for a long time. I regret that it took me 32 years to understand the difference between being helpful and being used, I said. I regret that I spent so many years waiting for recognition that was never going to come. But I don't regret walking away from people who could only love me when I stayed invisible. "And your relationship with Alex now?" "We exchange Christmas cards. Very polite, very distant Christmas cards. That might sound sad, but it's not. Because here's what I learned from that whole experience. Sometimes the only way to be seen is to stop standing in someone else's shadow. Sometimes love means refusing to be someone's silent partner. And sometimes, the most radical thing you can do for your family is to stop letting them use you. I built a life where my contributions matter, where my voice is heard, where my success belongs entirely to me. I surrounded myself with people who celebrate my victories instead of asking me to hide them. And if my family ever decides they want to be part of that life, they know where to find me. I'll be the one standing in the light. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and protecting yourself? What would you have done in my situation? Let me know in the comments below. If stories like this resonate with you, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. We share real stories about finding your voice when the people closest to you try to keep you silent. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.